You walk into a conversation and you already know how it ends. Not because you're psychic, because you've run the variables. You've seen this dynamic before. You know what that tone means. You know what the pause was about. You know what's going to be said next. And you still have to sit through it, pretending you don't. That's the part nobody talks about. Intelligence isn't just processing power. It's a specific kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from seeing more than you're supposed to see, faster than anyone around you, with no off switch. You were told this was an advantage. You were told things would get easier. That being the smart one meant you were set. But here's what actually happens. A mind that processes more deeply doesn't just think more. It also feels more, worries more, notices more, and holds more than most people around it realize. And that has a cost. This video is about that cost. Not to make you feel special, not to celebrate the struggle, but because if you've always suspected your mind works differently, and that difference has made certain parts of life harder, not easier, you deserve to understand why. There are 8 things that show up when this is you. 3 things it looks like from the outside, 3 things driving it underneath, and 2 things you can actually do with it. Here's the framing first. High cognitive ability doesn't mean you know more facts or score higher on tests. It means your brain takes in more data per second, processes it at more layers, and connects more of it together before it even reaches your conscious awareness. That sounds useful. And it is, sometimes. But it also means you're running more threads simultaneously than most people around you. You're tracking subtext while other people are still listening to the text. You're predicting outcomes while other people are still receiving the situation. And when your processing speed doesn't match the people or environments around you, it produces friction. Not because something is wrong with you, but because wide aperture processing in a narrow aperture world creates very specific problems. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski spent decades studying gifted individuals and found something that surprised people at the time. He found that higher cognitive ability didn't just come with stronger analytical capacity. It came paired with what he called psychic overexcitability, heightened responsiveness across emotional, sensory, and intellectual channels, not as a separate trait, as part of the same package. More processing depth, more emotional bandwidth, more surface area for the world to land on. That's the baseline. Here's what it actually looks like. The first thing it looks like is this. You go to a movie and you're watching the plot and the cinematography, and you notice the score shift 3 seconds before the reveal, and you're already tracking whether the ending is going to hold together, and by the time it's over, you've half enjoyed it. Because enjoyment requires some suspension of the critical faculty, and yours doesn't suspend easily. This isn't pretension. It's not a choice you're making. It's pattern recognition running on default. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. Look for structure, flag inconsistency, predict what comes next. The problem is, it doesn't stop when you want it to. It runs on everything: conversations, relationships, your own past decisions. You analyze when you'd rather just experience. You dissect when you'd rather just feel. And after a while, that becomes its own kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion of a mind that is never fully off. The second thing, not lonely in a dramatic way, just slightly out of frequency. You can have a perfectly pleasant conversation and still walk away feeling like you didn't actually connect with anyone, like you were present, but the thing you most wanted to say didn't fit anywhere. Like the level the conversation was running at wasn't quite the level you were running at. This isn't arrogance. It's a calibration gap. When your default processing depth is higher than the room's default, real connection requires translation, dropping to a register that doesn't feel quite like you, or staying in your register and watching people's eyes gloss slightly. Neither one feels like connection. Both feel like effort. And over time, that gap starts to read like a personal failure, like you're too much or too intense or too serious. When really the issue is frequency, not flaw. The third, the assumption is that intelligent people are confident. That knowing more means trusting yourself more. It's usually the opposite. The more variables you can see, the more ways something can go wrong. The more you understand a problem, the more aware you are of the edges of your own understanding. High cognitive ability doesn't quiet the inner critic. It gives the inner critic more data to work with. You see the flaw in your own reasoning before anyone else does. You anticipate failure before you've begun. You hold your conclusions lightly because you know how fast a conclusion can unravel when one variable shifts. That's epistemically healthy. But it doesn't feel healthy. It feels like you're the only person in the room who isn't sure, while everyone around you seems to have things figured out. What they have is lower awareness of complexity, which you would trade for exactly as long as it takes to remember what lower awareness costs you. The first root is this. Your brain uses more energy per second than average. This is not metaphorical. Neurological research on high-ability individuals consistently finds elevated metabolic activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for analysis, planning, and self-monitoring. More processing, more fuel consumed, more recovery required. Which is why you can feel mentally depleted from a conversation that didn't seem to tax anyone else in the room. Why you come home from ordinary social events running on empty. Why sleep doesn't always feel like it catches you up. It's not weakness. It's overhead. You're running a more complex program on the same hardware, in the same number of hours, with the same inputs. The cost is built into the system. The second root, high cognitive ability and sensory sensitivity tend to travel together. Dabrowski's research and later work by Elaine Aron found that the same nervous system wiring that produces deeper analysis also produces heightened emotional and sensory responsiveness. Louder rooms are louder. Social tension is more detectable. Other people's moods land with more weight than you asked for. This isn't fragility, it's bandwidth. A wider aperture system takes in more, which is the source of the processing depth and also the source of the overwhelm. The world wasn't designed for a nervous system calibrated this sensitively. Most environments were built for a narrower signal range, which means you are constantly receiving at a frequency the environment didn't account for, and managing that gap quietly all the time. And the third root, you've spent most of your life being identified as capable, which means the internal bar for acceptable performance, the one you set more than anyone else, is high. You don't just have to do the thing. You have to do it well, do it efficiently, have understood it fully before you begin. And anything short of that becomes evidence in your own mind that you aren't as capable as people assumed. This is what produces the paralysis. The procrastination that looks like laziness from the outside, but is actually the weight of performing below your own standard. The avoidance of things you might be mediocre at, because mediocrity doesn't compute when the story about you has always been that you're the one who gets things. The standard is miscalibrated, not because you set it too high for no reason, but because the baseline it was built against was never an accurate measure of what you owed anyone, including yourself. So here's what to do with all of that. The analysis doesn't need to produce a resolution every time. This is genuinely hard for a mind like yours. You're used to thinking your way to an answer. The loop usually closes. But not everything is a problem to resolve. Some things are conditions to live with. Some of the discomfort is simply the cost of having a nervous system that processes this deeply, and no amount of analysis changes that. The shift is from how do I fix this to how do I carry this without it consuming me. That's not resignation. That's knowing the difference between a problem and a feature. Your mind is a wide aperture system. Apertures don't need to be narrowed, they need to be aimed. Give it work that uses the depth. Give it relationships that can hold the weight. Give it enough stillness to let the signal settle. Not because that eliminates the overhead, but because it stops adding unnecessary friction on top of what's already there. The second, you are not going to figure everything out. And the attempt to do so is part of what is keeping you up at night. The inner critic that runs your own intelligence against you, the one that says you should have seen that coming, should have done better, should have known, is not giving you useful data. It's just running the analysis loop with no off-ramp. You can close a loop without resolving it. You can set down a question you've been carrying without answering it, not permanently. Just for now. The hardest thing for a mind like yours is to be genuinely uncertain and genuinely okay at the same time. But that's the practice. Not resolving the uncertainty. Sitting with it without treating it as an emergency that your intelligence is obligated to solve. Here's what all 8 of those things have in common. They're not deficits. They're the shadow side of the same system that makes you who you are. The analysis that exhausts you is the same faculty that catches what other people miss. The sensitivity that makes rooms loud is the same bandwidth that makes you perceptive in ways that matter. The self-doubt that slows you down is the same epistemics that keeps you honest when it would be easier not to be. The struggle isn't a malfunction, it's overhead. And knowing what's generating the overhead, what's actually happening in the system and why, that's not just intellectually interesting. That's the beginning of being a little less hard on yourself for what it costs. You didn't ask for a mind that runs this fast. You've just been living with one, and it has been working very hard, for a very long time, with very little acknowledgement. You can give it some now. If this one landed, subscribe. A new video goes up every week, and every one of them is trying to name something you've been feeling, but haven't quite had the words for yet. This is still psychology. If you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them, and drop a comment below. I want to know which one of these 8 hit closest to home. Still psychology.